Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the bench, Gerald Goines. We are bringing the bench tonight to the Harris County Courthouse. And right behind me here is where this trial of Gerald Goines has been taking place for over 2 weeks now. Goines is a former HPD narcotics officer charged with the murder of Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle. Forgive the fire alarm that's going on over our heads right now, but I just want to let you know we got a little bit of a fire alarm, but I want to tell you more about what this man has been charged with. He was charged with murder after he secured a no-knock search warrant to get into their Pecan Park home back in 2019. Now, I want to tell you that there are going to be 12 people who right now are evaluating the future of this man after we had closing arguments today between the two sides. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But first, we want to get to our legal analysts, the bench legal analysts. I'm going to start on the far right over there with Joe, far left of the viewer with Joe Venus. In the center, we have Rick DeToto, and right here we have Casey Gonzalez. We had an introduction today that lasted a bit longer for everybody inside the courtroom because the focus was on the charges. We thought they got this right last night, but for about an hour and 30 minutes, they were battling it out again today. You two were in the courtroom. Joe and Casey, your thoughts?
You know, we talked about this yesterday, Mario, how this is such an imperative part of the trial because at the end of the day, if they don't get this right, this case could be overturned on appeal.
Joe?
You know, that charge conference yesterday lasted till 8 o'clock last night, and they still weren't done with it this morning, so you can see the care that they put into it.
And Veronica Nelson had something to say about it. We want to hear what the judge and her thoughts were about the fact that they were still addressing this. Here's what she had to say.
Members of the jury, the defendant Gerald Goines stands charged by indictment with the offense of felony murder alleged to have been committed on or about the 28th day of January 2019 in Harris County, Texas. The defendant has pled not guilty. A person commits the offense of tampering with the government record if he makes, presents, or uses a governmental record with the knowledge of its falsity, and the government record was a search warrant issued by a magistrate.
It's in this case that they have to worry about. And I think that...
Okay, so we had 17 pages with regards to this charge from Veronica Nelson to the jury. Rick, is that a lot of information to give to a jury? Is it normal or not?
It's not normal. It's a whole lot of information to give a jury in a very complicated legal case. And I think what happened, the lawyers went back home last night and they started looking over things and they found some other things that they want to present to the jury. But one of the strengths the defense have is it's such a complicated case, it's going to be difficult for the jury to figure out exactly what to do.
And I should say we already know that there are some questions being asked by the jury. We know there are so many complex issues and pieces of evidence. Joe, you were able to gather some intelligence for us on that. What is being asked by the jury?
So the jury went home at about 5:30 today, and they've asked two questions between the time that they broke and went home. One was they wanted the Texas Ranger, Wolf's PowerPoint presentation that the state offered during his testimony, and the second thing they wanted was a list of all the exhibits, which there are, I think, over 1,000.
Right. And again, forgive us, we don't control the fire alarm system here, but that's what's going off in the middle of our show tonight. With regards to, it's live TV, you guys have to deal with it. But with regards to Lieutenant Jeff Wolf, he was a very powerful witness for really the defense here, and they really want to drill down on what he has to say about that. Any thoughts with regards to that specific request?
Yeah, I think that he was such an important witness, and the defense was able to really flip him and make them their own witness during this trial. So the fact that the jurors are already asking for his PowerPoint that was used during his testimony, I think is letting us know that they found him very credible.
Okay, well, let's now get to what the closing arguments look like. We had Keaton Fort for the state open things up on the prosecutorial side. On the defense, you had Mac Seacrest opening up for them. Here's a look at what took place inside the courtroom today.
This is the language in that search warrant. We'll go back to it for a second. He says there's a white male who he doesn't even know because he's done no research, who's 5'11" and 55 years old. Wrong. Who's 180 pounds. Wrong by quite a bit because you've never seen Dennis Tuttle. He says that there's a belief that they have possession of heroin. Nope. Affiant has good reason to believe, does believe, and hereby charges and accuses that on January 27th of 2019, they were in possession of heroin. No, that'd be Gerald Goines.
Very well planned.
Yeah, well, sorry. I'm in the middle of this, man. Okay, so forgive us. We're dealing with a fire alarm. I just want to let you know that this is a test. The Harris County Courthouse has made it very clear that they are testing the fire alarm systems at the same time that we decided to do our show here this evening. So we kind of chuckle about this, coincidence or not. But the reality of the matter is we're here because of what the defense teams and the state has presented early on. You were there with Keaton. What were your thoughts with what they had to say?
Keaton, vintage Keaton Forrest. I mean, he delivered. He's such a great speaker. He really made all the points he wanted to make, and spoke at a really high level, but relatable enough the jury could understand what he was saying.
My only concern regarding what Keaton did is he was really focused on the jury charge during his time, and I wished that he would have spoken a little bit more about the possible lesser includeds and what that looks like so that the jury could have a better understanding of that, because this is such a huge charge.
Rick, you and I have talked about the defense side and their big all-star. That's Nicole DeBoard. I mean, Max Seacrest also is one, but you really were looking forward to what she was going to have to say.
Yeah, two excellent lawyers. They're super experienced. They've tried a lot of high-profile cases, and I think that what they're trying to do is tell the jury that you don't know what happened inside that house. Confusion, not knowing, is the friend of the defense, and without knowing exactly what happened inside the house, there's no way you can convict them.
Well, let's take a listen now to what Nicole DeBoard, Anthony Shamani for the state told the juries today. To the jury, I should say.
They didn't want you to hear from the narcotics officers who searched. They're the ones that brought this up and claimed it wasn't so. It goes to causation because it goes to tell you what these individuals, Tuttle and Nicholas, were thinking. I suspect they saw the police coming. She had been on the phone texting, as you heard from Joanne Nicholas, within 45 minutes of the arrival of the police, awake. We know that they slept in shifts. We know they had a dog to guard that they had to put away if somebody was coming over. I suspect they saw the police. He either had that gun on him or he got to it really quickly. That's what this evidence shows.
Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm laying on my couch, I'm not expecting someone to come in. I have every lawful right to a firearm. I hear someone kick my door in. My dog is barking, going crazy. I hear my wife screaming. I hear them shoot my dog. I'm in the back room and I'm coming around the corner and oh my God, they're holding my wife at gunpoint. Now they've shot my wife. Absolutely, I'm going to open fire before I ask questions. I'm not going to ask, hey, is this the police in my home?
Rick, real simple. You had one side say they're drug dealers, violent people. The other side saying they're defending their home. That's all it was.
The key to me in the state's argument is speculation. They don't know what happened. They're saying, well, maybe she was thinking this, maybe she was doing this on the sofa, maybe they're watching guards. Speculation in this case as to what happened in that house is going to lead to a hung jury or a not guilty, clearly, in my mind.
I agree with Rick. I think there's too much unknown in this case, and the defense did a great job of really distracting the jury from what this case is truly about. And I agree. I think it's going to be a hung jury or not guilty.
Joe, how focused was the jury during these conversations about the Tuttles being drug dealers?
I mean, they looked like they were hanging on the words of all four of these lawyers, and which was a monumental task because this argument was 3 hours long. We were there all day, and so they did a good job of really just kind of knuckling down and paying attention to them. One thing I thought was interesting about this portion of the argument, this is when Nicole DeBoard and Tanisha Manning brought up Mr. Tuttle's mental health records. And there was some back and forth about why they brought that up. But the point that I think is important that the jury to take away is that, we know a week before Mr. Tuttle was not taking his meds. And so when you put that on top of this already chaotic situation, and he comes around that corner out of the bedroom and sees armed men, dead dog, somebody with a gun on his wife, that might explain why he didn't know they were police.
Tanisha and Keaton were both faced with a lot of objections by the defense. Somebody said it sounded distracting, but they were doing their job. That's why Nicole and Matt get paid a very, very hefty salary for this representation. How does that throw you off in that situation? And is it part strategy?
I think it's 100% strategy. I have been a prosecutor in that situation before where I had a defense attorney that was objecting every sentence objecting, and it throws you off. The jury starts getting frustrated and they stop listening to what you're saying. So I definitely think it was strategy in this case.
And as a defense attorney, I think it's also a fine balance. You have to be careful when you do that as a defense lawyer, because I've seen juries turn on the defense lawyer because they're constantly objecting, and it makes it look like the defense is not allowing the prosecution to get in what they want to say, or they're scared of what they're going to say. So it's a fine balance.
Joe, were you surprised by the number of objections?
A little. Some of the defense objections were probably strategy. I thought well timed at a point where, like you said earlier, Tanisha Manning was getting on a roll, and they would. It's like icing the kicker. But there were some big ones that we saw in the courtroom that were absolutely meritorious. In fact, it warranted a bench conference where all the lawyers were up at the bench with the judge for several minutes. And that really is what broke the flow of the state's argument. Not the objection, but that they had to keep going back.
Because right before you had that moment come to light, you did have Tanisha Manning have a very strong sequence of arguments that really was starting to click inside the courtroom. And you and I were texting each other. It's like, wow, she's really hitting her stride here. It appears the jury's buying into it. And then, boom, all of a sudden, they nailed her. And they were probably, on the defense side, sensing it as well.
Yeah, if you see your opponent getting on a roll and you're starting to get your butt kicked, sometimes you got to throw something in there to try to break it up. It's part of the strategy of trial and what we all do on our trials.
Okay, so we're going to wrap things up in terms of the sound from inside the courtroom by showing all four of the sound bites to get all four of these lawyers together. And let me clarify first. Texas is unique because you can have 90 minutes, an hour to close. We had 90 minutes today. And you have the ability to have various attorneys close, which you don't see everywhere else. And everybody saw that firsthand today. Let's go to the final sequence of sound from inside the courtroom today.
Let me ask this question. When an officer lies and he forces a group of armed peace officers into a home, and those officers knock down the front door, and they shoot first and kill the family dog, and then they shoot and kill an unarmed wife, and then they shoot multiple times into the back of the husband, one through the back of his head and out of his mouth, who's responsible? Is it us, the homeowner? Or is it the liar that set this all up?
He's not running, hiding, seeking refuge. He's marching. He's going forward. He's going forward. He's coming forward. He's shooting. He's shooting. And what's at the door? The light of day. So this business about he couldn't see and he didn't know, that's just not fair. These folks would not have died but for their unlawful acts and conduct. You can hate Gerald, you don't have to like false statements, and he can be dealt with in other ways, but he's not guilty of murder under these facts.
And I'm going to ask you, since I don't get to come back up here, to ask yourself, if we had the opportunity to respond to those comments, what would we say? And just because they say it louder or more dramatically doesn't make it so. Ask yourself the detailed questions. Ask yourself whether or not they're just leaping to conclusions, trying to turn a search warrant into an affidavit or an affidavit into a search warrant, trying to say that everything in a document is false when you can read it for yourself. You're the judges of the fact, every fact in this case. When a person shows you who they are, you have to believe them.
And what have you seen about Gerald Goines in this case? Other than he's willing to lie repeatedly. He's willing to frame live individuals and dead individuals. He's responsible for causing those peace officers to make forcible entry into that residence at 7815 Harding Street and causing the death of Dennis and Regina Tuttle. Folks, this case is simple. We just ask for your signature on that final chapter.
Tanisha Manning saying simply, we just ask for your signature on that final chapter. Joe, your thoughts on that?
I mean, they really pushed this whole story. They used the word narrative a lot. They called Gerald Goines the author of this disaster. One time called him the editor-in-chief. So I think Tanisha was just tying it all together with, basically making the jury part of their whole.
But what we didn't see from Tanisha, we saw Oliver Keaton of saying, but not for this warrant.
Right.
But not for this warrant.
Right.
But not. She didn't follow that theme. Is it because you don't want the jury to hear that over and over again?
No, she did finalize it with that. She brought it back once at the end of her closing by saying, just like Keaton said, but for Gerald Goines, none of this would have happened. And so I think, they had, all four of these lawyers had kind of a divide and conquer approach. That was clearly where Keaton lived, and she was more into the emotion of the deal.
Rick, to Nicole's closing today, she was very demonstrative. She had some powerful words at the ending, but also demonstrative. She came out and she showed the jury when he came out of the back room, Dennis Tuttle assumed a dominant position. She used these phrases again, a tactical position. She was in a dominant position, talking about Regina Nicholas and being very demonstrative. How does that sell the jury?
So as a trial lawyer in a criminal case and a civil case, you want to take over the courtroom. You want to get in the prosecutor's space. You want to go up to the jury. You want to get in front of the judge. You want to take over. You don't want to ask permission to walk around. You want them glued on you. You don't want to stand behind the podium and read like you're in law school, your closing argument. So that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to connect with the jury, but she's trying to give force to her words by standing in front of them and pointing the weapon and standing in front of the prosecutors and making them uncomfortable. It's pretty common in what we do.
Casey, they're arguing also the fact that, he didn't really lie in the search warrant. He lied on the affidavit, and then they got a search warrant. He really lied on the affidavit.
This is an interesting argument because I have thought the entire trial that the jury was going to find him guilty of tampering with the government record. I had not thought to argue it this way, so I think it's interesting. We'll see what the jury does with it, but they're going for a not guilty, period.
Rick, you're smiling. Is it because, does it really matter here in your opinion?
It's kind of a wrinkle they're just throwing in. Do they really believe that? I don't know. But I've always said when we first started talking about this case, the strongest part of the case for the state was that issue. I mean, he's allegedly been found to have tampered with that document. So I would, and that's their strategy, but I would leave that alone and focus on the causation, because sometimes the jury thinks you're throwing everything up against the wall and you lose credibility as to what you're trying to argue.
Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas, Joe, were portrayed throughout this trial as bad people. They were violent. They deserve, meaning what's coming to them because the way they shot up HPD officers. Dennis Tuttle, he had great accuracy. He was a sharpshooter. Remember, you heard Nicole basically say that today. Have you ever seen, in all the years you've been trying cases, victims like these be completely flipped so dramatically by the other side?
Yeah, I mean, there are times. It's usually not someone like this. It's usually somebody where the complainant in a case is maybe a very violent gang member, or they've got a long criminal history, and it explains why somebody in not necessarily in this case, but somebody like in Gerald Goines' position, why they would have to act in a violent manner.
And the reason why I asked this is because you heard Nicole say the prosecution, they're just throwing out their Hail Mary here. But was this really a Hail Mary strategy by the defense to say, listen, we know he lied on the warrant. Our best shot is just to make these other people look as evil and as bad as possible?
I don't know if it was a Hail Mary strategy. It was probably their only strategy.
And let me say this, that's our job. As a trial lawyer, as a lawyer defending my client, that's what we have to do. We have to find ways to show that maybe the complainants didn't have clean hands. As a father, as a parent, as a human being, maybe that's not my job. But as a trial lawyer, we have to aggressively go after the complainants and show things to help our client. It may not be nice, it may not be perfect, but that's how the system works.
Nicole, Casey, how much fight is there, do you think, still, even though everything's been said and everything's been done, how much more of a fight is there behind the scenes now, do you think, between these two, between the juries and everyone's different opinions?
I think it's going to be a battle in there. I think it's going to take a long time to get through the charge, to get a grasp of that document, and then to go through all of the facts. There's going to be people in there leaning one way, people leaning another, and they're going to have strong feelings, so it's going to be a while.
You know, you never want to say there's a winner in tragedy. You never do, because there really isn't in a tragic case. But I will say the one person who comes out as a winner already, I would say, is Judge Veronica Nelson. She has had a very, very good trial, really impressed me, just kept it going. Speaking with all of you, you said she was going to be moving things along. She was a very diligent judge, and she showed that power inside the courtroom, Joe.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, we've all known her for many, many years. She was a prosecutor.
Of course, are you going to badmouth a judge on television on a beat, but still, but go ahead.
We've all known her since she was a prosecutor. She was actually the judge's lawyer for some time, so she knows what she's doing. She was, an all-star college athlete. She's been in high-pressure situations, and she has handled this beautifully.
So in these high-profile cases, things get crazy, people get crazy, stuff comes out of the woodwork, there's media. You need a judge that can take control of the courtroom, take control of the lawyers, and take control of the lawyers' egos, and she did a great job of that. She's a great judge, and we're happy to have her.
Speaking of crazy, the jury goes home tonight. They're not sequestered. Your thoughts on that?
Well, this has been my concern this entire trial, is once they leave this courtroom, this courthouse, are they going to go home and turn on the news? Are they going to go home and talk to family members? And is somebody going to say something to them accidentally? I mean, we have no idea.
Is there a greater percentage of that actually happening? I guess, do you see more problems with the jury once they start to deliberate when you're talking about people not following the rules?
I was shocked because I just learned that. I would absolutely request for this jury to be sequestered. You don't know who they're going to be influenced by. You don't know what their wife.
Rick, we saw them go home about an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, I would, as the defense lawyer, have asked, and the prosecution, that they be sequestered, because you don't know what they're exposed to. You don't know who they're talking to. You don't know what they're watching on TV. They don't know their mom is calling and saying, hey, what do you think about this and that? So I think it's a risk for both sides.
Joe.
I mean, sequestration helps, but not always. We've seen it happen, like in the Durst case down in Galveston, where that jury was acting up, and they were sequestered. So I think you just have to get a read on your jury, trust them, and hope that they're not, at home watching this right now.
When do you guys expect? I know. Listen, we've talked about this. I like to say it's a theater than unexpected. I was talking to Max Seacrest about this. He goes, with the jury, you just don't know. You just never know. It depends on how smart the jury really is in cases. I get the sense that they are a smart jury. We know they've been asking for things. What's your predictions on to potentially how long this? I've heard hung jury, but how long do you think it will last before it gets to that point? Starting with you, Casey.
So I think if they come back quickly, it's going to be a not guilty, which is the opposite of what we usually think. Typically, as a prosecutor, when a jury comes back quickly, you're happy about that.
So would you be surprised if they come back tomorrow or early Thursday morning?
I think it's going to be at least through Friday.
At least through Friday. Rick.
The thing that stuck out to me is when you said, Judge Nelson said in the jury charge talks, that we've never had a case like this before. And the judge and these very experienced lawyers were struggling to put a charge together to encompass the law. Now imagine if you're not a lawyer, you've never been in a trial before, and you have to sit back there after listening to this testimony for 2 weeks and apply those facts to the law that the lawyers and the judge had a difficult time trying to figure out. So in my mind, that tells me, I'm leaning toward a hung jury or not guilty. I think it'll be at least until Friday before we hear something.
I think the key takeaway is 8+1. In a normal murder case, you have a choice between guilty or not guilty. Here we have not guilty, guilty of murder, and 6 other options to find him guilty of tampering with a government document, plus a special issue on whether or not he used or exhibited a deadly weapon. So take a normal, complicated case and then throw in all of these other possible verdicts. Yeah, it's going to be at least through the week.
And the reality is this, that this man right here, Gerald Goines, he's at home tonight. He's going to bed. But it might be the last time he sleeps inside of his bed for many years, because if he is found guilty of murder, he gets detained immediately, and there's no chance for him to actually go back home. But if he's convicted on the other ones of tampering, he gets to go home and then come back for sentencing, which is something that, you know, a lot of people don't really think about, but that's the reality of what he's sitting at tonight. So, listen, that pretty much wraps up everything that we're dealing with tonight, including with the fire alarm. kind of felt like we were getting objections there from the DA's office. But we want to thank you guys for joining us. We know you've been obviously very diligent throughout the course of this trial. Again, Casey Gonzalez, Rick DeToto, as well as Joe Venus. All of you guys have been very helpful in making really a truly all-star team in terms of legal analysts for the bench. So thank you so much. We'll be talking to you out through the course of the week. We hope that maybe it won't be a whole week, but we'll see what happens. It is a trial. But that's the very latest. And thank you at home for joining us. From the bench, Gerald Goines, live from the courthouse tonight at the Harris County Courthouse. We'll be back here tomorrow morning starting at 9 o'clock on KPRC2+. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.